Hello, everyone. My name is Mark. I am 32 years old, and I swear on the last functioning brain cell I possess that I did not expect my Tuesday morning to turn into a hostage situation involving my stepmom, drifting clouds of sage smoke, and 67 missed calls that made my phone look like it was under attack. For context, my dad, Robert, who is 59, married my stepmom, Leela, who is 48 when I was 17. She was never evil, not in a fairy tale witch in the forest way, but she was deeply, aggressively spiritual. That type of spiritual where she said things like, words hold vibration, while simultaneously screaming at a barista because, as she once claimed in front of a line of horrified customers, the foam on her latte was energetically hostile and might send her into an emotional tailspin. She lived in a confusing overlap between mysticism and chaos, and the only person who loved her more than her own reflection was my father. To this day, I do not understand why. I do not think he understands either, but love makes people do strange things. I have always been the responsible one in the family. I helped my parents financially whenever I could. During college, I worked at a hardware store and secretly paid an overdue electric bill because dad was stressed and embarrassed. After I graduated and got my first real job at 25, I helped them refinance the house. 2 years ago, dad had a minor stroke, and I handled the paperwork, the insurance calls, the medication schedules, and even the appointments he kept pretending he did not need. I never complained. They were my family. I loved my dad. And even though Lila exhausted my patience on a spiritual level I did not know existed, I tolerated her. Last year, Dad sold the house so he and Lila could downsize and move to Arizona because she claimed the air there had a higher spiritual density and would elevate her journey. They left with a solid amount of money from the sale. I stayed in Seattle in a two-bedroom apartment I rent, but treat like a long-term project. I work in information technology, live alone, and live comfortably. Not rich, not struggling, just stable. 2 months ago, Dad called and asked if Lila could stay with me for a couple of weeks while she grounded herself. That phrase should have set off every alarm in my system, but Dad sounded tired, worn down, and honestly sad. I thought they were having marital issues or she needed space and I wanted to help him. So I said yes. That was the worst decision I have made all year, and I have accidentally deleted the wrong server folder at work before, so that is saying something. Lila arrived with the force of a natural disaster. She had 6 full suitcases, a box of crystals big enough to supply a gift shop, a metal singing bowl the size of a medium dog, and, as if the universe wanted comedic flair, 2 pet ferrets named Moonbeam and Trevor. My lease does not allow ferrets. It does not allow open flames, which I later learned included sage sticks. It definitely does not allow someone to smudge the shower curtains with essential oils while humming. But Lila did not believe in rules. She believed in energy. At first, it was manageable. Annoying, but manageable. Every morning at 6, she hit that singing bowl like she was calling ancient spirits to brunch. She rearranged my furniture and explained that my couch was blocking the flow of cosmic currents. She informed me that my robot vacuum had masculine energy that made her uncomfortable, and that she was unplugging it until it healed. Then came the money hints. She started making statements that sounded vague but with purpose. She said things like, I feel that the universe wants you to contribute to our spiritual alignment fund. I assumed she meant groceries, because she ate organic everything and the receipts were painful. But no, she meant rent. For her. In my apartment. One night, she told me with perfect confidence, Mark, I need you to start paying me $600 a month so I can have the spiritual space I deserve. This apartment supports my healing journey. I burst out laughing. I thought she had attempted humor. She was not joking. She crossed her arms, stiffened her posture, and said, I am serious. You are a man of abundance. Do not block your karma. That was the exact moment I felt my last surviving neuron sigh and give up on me. I told her she had 10 hours to get out of my apartment. Not 24 hours, 10. I set an actual timer on my phone. She turned pale, staggered dramatically, and then collapsed on my couch, whispering, "He is rejecting my essence as if she were moments from passing into another plane of existence." I told her she could take her essence, her crystals, her singing bowl, and Trevor the ferret to someone else's home because she was done staying in mine. She spent the next 3 hours alternating between crying, chanting, and threatening to cleanse my aura in my sleep. And then she left in a flurry of scarves, bags, and offended huffing. The next morning at 6 a.m., my phone was vibrating so much it skittered off my nightstand. I had 67 missed calls from Dad. The voicemails were a journey through confusion, betrayal, melodrama, and whatever else he was feeling. He said, "Son, call me back." He said, "Why did you kick out your mother?" He said, "Lila is devastated." He said, "The police are here." Oh, wait, false alarm. He said, "Call me back, or I am driving there." It went on and on. When I finally called him, he launched straight into a speech about loyalty, compassion, and how family must support each other during moments of spiritual reset. I asked him if he knew she tried to charge me rent to stay in my home. He went silent for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "She phrased that differently to me." Of course she did. 2 days later, Lila sent me a long text that said, "Your aura is contaminated with anger and masculine rigidity. I hope you find peace." I blocked her, except the drama did not end. Oh no, it evolved. I thought blocking Lila would buy me at least a week of peace, but instead it triggered what I now refer to as the Great Parental Meltdown of Seattle. 3 days after I kicked her out, I was sitting at my desk at work, trying to catch up on a backlog of tickets when one of my coworkers messaged me asking why there was an older man pacing around the lobby like he had just escaped from a wildlife rehabilitation center. I got up to investigate, and there was my dad, looking like a stressed-out raccoon in human form, wide-eyed, disheveled, clutching a half-crumpled boarding pass with the desperation of someone who had made multiple poor choices in a row. He had flown to Seattle without telling me, not because of an emergency, not because of danger. He said he had come because he needed to talk face-to-face before his brain exploded. Those were his exact words, said in a tired, defeated voice that made me wonder what fresh disaster had unfolded in Arizona. We went to get coffee near my office. He kept tugging at his shirt sleeve, rubbing his forehead, staring down at his cup like the latte art might reveal answers about his life. When he finally spoke, the entire story spilled out of him in one long, painful confession that made everything click into place. Lila had blown through almost all their money. Not some, not half, almost all of it. He told me that when they sold the house, they had walked away with a sizable cushion. Nothing extravagant, but enough to live comfortably for years if managed wisely. Except Lila had managed it with all the restraint of someone let loose in a casino with a stolen credit card. She had spent tens of thousands on spiritual retreats in Sedona, astrology subscriptions that promised to realign her destiny, handmade chakra rugs woven by artisans who apparently believed carpets should cost more than used cars, and a 6-week online course called Becoming Your Own Moon Goddess that cost more than my rent. Dad admitted he had known she was spending money, but he had no idea it was that extreme. He had trusted her. He had believed her when she said things like, "This purchase is necessary for my awakening." He had believed her when she said the retreats were investments in their shared future. He had believed her when she insisted the credit card charges were covered by her side income from reading tarot for tourists. He kept talking, and every sentence made my spine tighten. He told me he had not wanted to tell me earlier because he felt ashamed. He felt like he had failed as a husband, failed as a partner, and failed as a father. He said he had always wanted to give Lila what she needed, but he had not realized she would burn through their financial stability in under a year. The worst part was that she had opened 2 credit cards in his name, using his information. The balances were not massive, but they existed, and they were illegal, and he did not discover them until he started getting letters addressed to him about payments he did not recognize. He told me he confronted her, and she said something about the universe guiding her actions. When he pushed harder, she broke down crying, then tried to blame Mercury being in retrograde. He looked small. That is the only way I can describe it. My dad is not a small man. He is a tall, sturdy guy who spent his life working with his hands and solving real-world problems. But sitting across from me that day, he looked older than he should have, tired in a way that went deeper than stress. Like the foundation of his life had been quietly chipped away until it finally collapsed. I felt bad for him. Despite everything, despite the chaos Lila constantly created, despite the fact that he had defended her more times than I could count, he was still my dad. And seeing him like that hurt. But I also knew that pity was not going to fix his situation. I told him he needed to take control of his life before Lila dragged him down even further. I told him he needed to talk to a lawyer, freeze the credit, and stop letting her drive the narrative with crystals and tears. I also made something else very clear. I told him I was not a bank, I was not a therapist, and I was not going to let her move back into my apartment under any circumstances. He did not argue. He stayed on my couch for 3 days while he sorted out the mess. Those were the calmest days I had experienced in a long time. No singing bowls echoing through the walls, no crystals being arranged into sacred triangles on my coffee table, no ferrets zooming across the floor like possessed noodles. Just quiet. Just peace. Just my dad sitting on the couch watching documentaries and making himself sandwiches like a normal person. He told me he was sorry. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly, every day, until the guilt was spilling out of him like water through a crack in a dam. He apologized for bringing chaos into my home. He apologized for believing Lila without question. He apologized for the phone calls. He apologized for the drama. He apologized for making his problems mine. Once Dad settled in and took the first real breaths of peace he had probably had in months, I thought things would calm down. I thought life would return to something resembling normal. I thought the universe had finally decided I had suffered enough chaos for one fiscal quarter. I was wrong, because a week after Dad flew back to Arizona to retrieve some legal documents, I came home from work and found an envelope taped to my apartment door. It had the stiff, overly formal look of something written by people who think clipboards give them authority. It was from my apartment management. Inside was a letter that made my stomach drop. According to the property office, they had received a noise complaint. Not a minor one either. A written, officially logged, full-page complaint describing aggressive chanting at inappropriate hours and disruptive ferret-related disturbances affecting the peace and comfort of neighboring residents. They reminded me of the pet restrictions in my lease agreement and said that if it happened again, my tenancy could be reviewed. I stood in my hallway rereading the paragraph about ferret disturbances like I had slipped into a parallel universe where I had unknowingly become a ferret landlord. I do not chant. I do not host chanting. I do not own ferrets. I do not even allow meatballs near my carpet, let alone elongated chaos weasels. But I knew someone who did. Someone who had recently been removed from my home, under circumstances she still insisted were spiritually abusive. Someone who had enough free time and resentment to weaponize both crystals and drama. I did not want to believe Lila had actually gone this far, but the complaint listed dates and times. I checked the timestamps and realized they all aligned with days when I was not home. Times when Lila knew my schedule because she lived with me long enough to memorize it. Someone had entered my building, walked down my hallway, and caused enough noise for someone else to write a letter threatening my lease. And unless a pack of wandering ferrets had escaped into the city and chosen me as their landlord, the culprit was obvious. I called Dad, and as soon as I mentioned the letter, he let out a sigh so deep it sounded like it originated from the Earth's core. He said he needed to show me something, then sent me screenshots. They were messages from Lila. They were unhinged in the way that only someone convinced the universe supports their vendetta can be unhinged. She had texted him that, if Mark wants war, he will get war, and that she would shake my spiritual foundation until I understood the consequences of rejecting destiny. Dad told me he had blocked her immediately after reading that because even he realized this had gone beyond eccentricity and into territory where you start wondering if you should check your locks twice. He was shaken. Not surprised, but shaken. And that was the moment he told me he had decided to do something he had avoided for years. He had finally filed for divorce. It was not a dramatic moment. It was quiet, exhausted. A man finally admitting that love cannot fix someone who uses it as an excuse to destroy everything around them. When he told her, she responded exactly the way one would expect from someone who believed the cosmos personally endorsed all of her decisions. She went online. She posted a 12-paragraph Facebook rant claiming I had banished her from her sacred resting place, that I had poisoned my father against her, that I had severed the energetic tether between our souls, and that my aura was rotting from within due to my hostility. The comments section turned into the greatest unintentional comedy show I had seen in a long time. Old family members I had not spoken to in years chimed in with confused reactions. Former neighbors she barely knew posted vague encouragements as if she were going through a bad breakup with a houseplant. And right in the middle of the chaos was my aunt, who did not believe in sugarcoating anything. My aunt typed, "Girl, you lived there for 11 days. After Lila's Facebook meltdown, after the noise complaint, after the credit card disaster, after the spiritual warfare threats, I thought the universe would finally wrap this saga up with a bow and move on to harassing someone else. But the universe apparently wanted one last encore because last week my phone rang and it was Dad, and he was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. It was the kind of choking, wheezing laughter that makes you think someone slipped something into their coffee. I asked him what was going on, and he said he had just heard news about Lila that was so ridiculous, so unbelievably on brand, that he needed a moment to get it out without passing out from lack of oxygen. When he finally managed to speak, he told me that Lila had moved into a new place she was calling her spiritual sanctuary. Not an apartment, not a house, a sanctuary. And she had moved in with a man named Brant, not Brent. Brant with an A? And according to Dad, this man ran a YouTube channel dedicated to teaching people how to absorb their nutrients from sunlight. Not plants, not fruit, not supplements. Sunlight. Pure solar dining. It was the kind of lifestyle that made even Lila seem restrained by comparison. Dad said Lila had told Brant her usual tragic backstory, but with upgraded dramatics. She told him that Dad emotionally drained her aura and that I stole her money. Not that she stole Dad's identity. Not that she spent $90,000 on cosmic rugs and retreats. No, she crafted a narrative where she was the victim of two men who somehow siphoned her spiritual and financial energy. The best part was that Brant did not believe a single word. He asked her to show proof. Real proof. Evidence. And since she did not have any, she tried to fake bank statements. She actually attempted to create a set of counterfeit documents to convince a man who lived off photons that she was financially abused. Brant caught her in the act and kicked her out of the sanctuary, so now she is living with her sister in Ohio. And that might have been the end of it, except her sister, who has apparently lived with Lila long enough to understand the severity of her cosmic nonsense. Sent Dad a message on Facebook that said she was sorry because Lila tried to cleanse their dog with incense and now the dog growls every time it smells smoke. That was the message that caused Dad's tear-inducing laughter. After everything, Dad is healing. Slowly but in real ways. He found a small apartment not far from my place. Something simple. Something quiet. Something without altars, rugs that cost more than a mortgage payment, or bowls that vibrate at dawn like a spiritual fire alarm. He started going to actual therapy with a real licensed therapist, instead of someone who tells him his emotional trauma is caused by the moon, being in a judgmental phase. He even started doing normal dad things again. He comes over on Sundays, sits on my couch, eats unhealthy snacks without guilt, and yells at football players who cannot hear him. It feels ordinary in a way I did not realize I missed. As for me, I am finally living a quiet, ferret-free existence. No chanting, no smoke, no cosmic threats, no strange footprints on my carpet. When the sun rises, I wake up to silence instead of a metal bowl ringing like a medieval summoning ritual. The air feels lighter. The walls feel calmer. My home is mine again. And I swear, if I ever hear a singing bowl again, I am calling emergency services because absolutely nothing good follows that sound. I have lived the data. The ending is simple. My dad got out, I got my apartment back, and Lila finally found the spiritual space she needed, far, far away from me.